Lost in a life of pain and neglect. I'm a murdered soul in a crippled living body, I lamented. After losing my mother and my job months apart, I sit alone, haunted by the ghosts of grief and bullying, wondering if I'll ever breathe easy again. Will I find peace or more despair? I simply want to express everything that is overwhelming me because I feel I have surpassed the limits of what I can endure. I am documenting the most significant experiences. I could easily create a series of books if I detailed everything. So there is a lengthy wall of text coming your way. You do not need to trouble yourself with reading all of this or waste your time if you do not wish to do so. I apologize if I have wasted your time. I did not have a happy childhood. We were not wealthy, nor were we even middle class. I was diagnosed with pes planus. I dislike the term flat feet, and it is even worse in my native language at the age of 4, and it has worsened significantly over time. In my case, I will likely be unable to walk by the time I reach 50 years old. Currently, I rely on orthopedic shoes and use 3 types of painkillers simultaneously because every step causes me pain if I do not. I have always been more on the optimistic side. I quickly learned to use a computer at the age of 4 on my uncle's Windows 3.1 system. I began reading at 3 years old, and I also learned to write, or rather type and count, by 4 years old. I quickly excelled at mental arithmetic and the basics of mathematics. I still vividly remember the chaotic moments when our house burned down while I was still that young. I experienced bullying starting at age 8. It began innocently enough, with children teasing me about my disability and no one wanting to play with me because of my unattractive orthopedic shoes. I quickly grasped what self-confidence and feeling emotions meant. As my physical condition declined due to negligent parenting, being overworked and not encouraged to play outdoors or engage in sports, the situation worsened over time. My mother also became depressed due to marital troubles, and my grandmother's health was severely declining at the same time. She passed away a year later when I was 9. A year after that, I distinctly remember a classmate expressing a desire to die because he felt unloved, ugly, and useless. That was me, the chubby, nerdy, soon-to-be bespectacled child, fitting all the stereotypes. My high grades and ability to understand complex topics at a young age likely exacerbated the situation. Things did not improve during puberty. I was bullied simply for being unattractive and overweight. I suffered through mandatory school runs, publicly shamed in front of hundreds due to my weight and disability. One boy shouted as I limped through the beginning of the course that he would be terribly embarrassed if we shared the same name. 2 years later, my parents divorced after much verbal conflict. I attempted to be funny once in school, and that decision haunted me for an entire year, breaking a significant part of my spirit. My grades plummeted and I hit an all-time low, having to repeat a year. No one expected that to happen because no one truly cared about my situation. By age 15, I felt broken inside and crippled outside. Life became challenging on limited funds, but things were bound to improve. I received a diagnosis of scoliosis, an S-shaped curve of 36 degrees. It was painful enough to cause discomfort, yet not severe enough to warrant surgery. A year later, I had enough of all the fat shaming and successfully lost all the weight that had been an issue for years, only for it to return once more. I anticipated receiving some kindness, friendly faces, and perhaps some appreciation, but I found that I was merely a tool to fix other people's computers and problems. People did not attempt to convince me that I was anything more than that, and my family were the worst offenders. Ultimately, everything felt increasingly hopeless because I had actually tried to improve my life, only to become a normal weight consumer. Eventually, I finished high school with 6 of us graduating. Although I was not of significant value to any of them, they maintained a degree of respect for my consistently high grades, having changed courses to a better fit, and the fact that they could always rely on me, that is, take advantage of me without facing consequences. There was not much else happening, as they would not engage in conversation unless absolutely necessary or if they wanted to use my Samsung Galaxy 3 during study breaks. Though they acknowledged my ability to empathize and provide valuable insights, they likely had better options to discuss such matters. We promised to keep in touch, certainly. Everyone did except for me. I was the only one not invited to the party. So much for being valued for who I was. Deep down, I expected this outcome, but I clung to a flicker of hope. Perhaps I would have done anything to finally receive a bit of positive acknowledgement, but of course it does not work that way. I had one best friend during my school years at any given time. One of them turned against me and supported the bullies. The second one entered a relationship and quickly distanced himself from our social circle. The third, the last, who I still keep in touch with but only occasionally, has little in common with me and does not appreciate my interests, nor vice versa. He does not engage with what I say but frequently rants about his own problems, yet I keep him around simply as someone to chat with occasionally. I also repair computers and phones for him, of course. Honestly, my iPods and headphones have been my true best friends. Anyway, several months passed and I was very lonely and lost at that moment. It was early 2012. Suddenly, I decided to raise my hopes of finding some happiness and started online dating. The first few weeks yielded little until a rather attractive girl I liked actually responded. A few days later, she semi-ghosted me. However, we reconnected, and at age 19, I entered my first and only relationship. I even forgave her for posting a slightly distorted profile picture. She looked similar yet different in real life. 17 months in total. The first 4 were filled with pure joy, then things began to decline. Regular life, marked by one misfortune after another, started to affect both of our mental states. She verbally abused me while I dealt with a broken foot, unable to exert enough strength on my crutches to move for an extended period. A suicide attempt followed later that year on December 25 in my mother's house. Merry Christmas. I discovered she had cheated on me on Easter. Happy Egg Day, people continuously targeted her alongside me, further heightening my nervousness. Love is supposedly blind. Once those 17 months concluded, I was abruptly bombarded by a barrage of unwelcome news. I was notified of our breakup via text message from her ex-stepmother, who labeled me an egocentric jerk for wanting to spend more time with her instead of just a few hours every few weeks. I was humiliated regarding my weight, called a big sausage, and told she never truly loved me, and she seemed to express regret about that. She poisoned her 3 younger sisters, ages 4, 7, and 8, against me by feeding them lies, even calling me a big sausage in front of them, which was particularly painful to read. She had the audacity to drop off my leftover belongings at her new boyfriend's place, whom she started dating just 10 days after our breakup and who made her pregnant 3 weeks later. I received a message from an unknown number about 3 weeks following the breakup that explicitly stated, "Her new boyfriend was already there the day after you broke up." My father took it upon himself to inform me about everything happening in her life since she ended our relationship, as he had never removed her as a friend on Facebook. Naturally, I would have never reached out to her again, so I would have remained unaware if he had not told me. He seemed proud to share all this news with me. Then he wore a surprised expression when I began to cry that Christmas evening. "Why are you crying again? Don't worry, things will get better soon. Oh, by the way, have you looked for a job yet? I am completely serious." I was in shambles, having lost the remaining fragments of my spirit. The one person I believed gave me love, appreciation, and belief in myself had transformed into my greatest enemy. I had to endure all the pain, along with the additional pain that others inflicted on me, completely alone. There was no help from doctors, no access to affordable mental health support for over 3 years, a dysfunctional family, and no remaining friends. Unemployment continued. I undertook therapy in 2016, internships, and experienced numerous hardships in between. Before I knew it, it was already 2019. I engaged with an employment service, completed a month-long unpaid internship, and for the first time, someone professional recognized my potential and hired me through a 6-month learn at the workplace contract. 2 weeks before the expiration of the contract, I required one positive evaluation for a permanent position. Then the COVID-19 pandemic struck, bringing everything to a standstill. Suddenly, it was unclear whether I would be able to continue the contract. If it ended prematurely, I would not even qualify for protective benefits. The stress overwhelmed me. For once, the stars aligned in my favor and I secured the job. At that point, my social skills were abysmal. It took an entire year for me to feel comfortable speaking to a colleague, always tinged with fear. The necessity of working from home did not assist either. For a while, my social skills actually deteriorated instead of improving, and recovering from that later proved impossible as I withdrew further into isolation. COVID conditions improved somewhat by 2021. Just when things began to look more optimistic, my beloved calico cat Minik passed away from stomach cancer that August. 7 weeks later, during a routine checkup following a fall, my mother received a diagnosis of lung cancer. I made the decision to move out in 2023 for practical reasons. My mother lived in social housing, and if she passed away, I would not be able to remain in the unit, rendering me homeless. It was also financially beneficial for her, as rent was determined by income. By that point, I was nearly 30, so it was about time I left, I suppose. I had not been the happiest person, and I felt she needed space as well. Another stressful period ensued for both of us, and soon I found myself entirely on my own and alone. For some reason, just 1 month after moving out, everything in my life began to fall apart. I received the news that my mother had become terminally ill. My closest aunt's stepfather passed away on Christmas Day, plunging me into a poor mental state. My younger nephew experienced depression. On New Year's Day, I learned that my other aunt was also terminally ill. She died a few weeks later. My uncle was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness simultaneously with a severe zona attack, while my other uncle received a Parkinson's diagnosis. 2 relatives took their own lives 1 day apart. Another relative suffered a massive stroke and is now in a semi-paralyzed state. For weeks at a time, I often heard from no one unless I was needed to assist. I also helped my mother move to a new residence that better suited her needs. My helping father casually remarked in front of her and my mentally burdened aunt that he would not pay for my funeral if I died soon, so I should get insurance. I faced problems in my own living situation, such as going months without hot water or heating during late winter. My mother continued to decline. I found myself without anyone to confide in about these life-altering events that unfolded in just 5 months. The stress amplified my anxiety and social challenges, leading me to become depressed, ultimately resulting in my work performance suffering. I took a month-long sick leave. The day I returned, I was laid off due to budget reasons. I suppose they wanted to spare me a bit. My last day of work was when I lost the final vestige of who I had been just 6 months earlier. I no longer went to the gym, did not care about my stationary bike at home, and instead traded those pursuits for days spent lounging on the couch, engaging in pointless activities online. I began to express my anger more overtly towards people, especially my father, to whom I unleashed a barrage of cruel text messages. And I felt no motivation for anything except for the weekly trip to the local supermarket, doctor, or pharmacy. I have not had any visitors in my apartment since November 11, 2023, which was the day of my housewarming party. I am uncertain if I truly exist for a purpose. I constantly find myself thinking that life cannot possibly get any worse, only for it to manifest again, usually immediately after something relatively positive occurs. But now those somewhat better moments have vanished as well. I feel suffocated with no means of restoration. I have spent my entire life serving others, enduring mistreatment or being ignored in response, becoming nothing more than a mere bubble of air while still being in everyone's way. The eternal burden controlled by two bridges, a long, tenuous path to enter and a short, stunted route to exit. And this cycle repeats over and over again. Last month, I began a job and mental health counseling process. The kind woman during my job counseling intake informed me that I was on the verge of a burnout and cautioned that any additional major stress could cause me to break down. She assured me that I was not over-dramatizing my situation since the events that occurred truly are severe. I have often felt like I was exaggerating and lacked the right to complain because others suffer more in different ways. Many people have told me to think of those individuals instead of being selfish, while in reality, I have been accumulating extreme pressure and should not be further disregarded for it as a reward. That long overdue moment when someone understood my feelings was the first glimpse of peace and rest I have experienced in at least 4 years. Yet deep down, I believe it might simply be too late as conditions are unlikely to improve anytime soon. Therapy may also come too late as I need to clear the waiting list and similar obstacles. The therapist will likely blame me for most things anyway, just like those who assert that I possess a bad personality, including, once again, my father, who believe it is normal for me to be consistently rejected and that I should merely breathe and keep quiet. My mother unexpectedly passed away from her illness 2.5 weeks ago, on March 26, 2025. We were scheduled to go to the hospital on the 28th for radiotherapy due to a metastasis in her leg. All other organs were functioning properly. I feel like a lifeless soul trapped in a broken body. I have literally lost all willpower to fight. I do not wish for life to continue for another 40 years. I am not prepared to age into a wheelchair, only to reach a point where I will fade into ashes without anyone noticing or caring. I am utterly exhausted. I have made mistakes too. Everyone makes mistakes. I am not above admitting that. Perhaps I have said things that hurt others and I might have misunderstood people's feelings at times. I will certainly never claim I am always doing the right thing. However, I am uncertain whether I deserve all of this as I strive to be the best version of myself, and I sincerely hope I am taking the right steps to prove that I am worthy of life and happiness. I have done everything for everyone else, yet I have never received the minimal respect that confirms my humanity. I have received a great deal of criticism for nearly everything I have done or failed to do, even though most of the time I have not made any mistakes or intentionally hurt anyone in my life. I seem to bear the brunt of it all. It is not fair. I wish I had never been born. I sincerely apologize if I wasted your time. Story 2. My best friend Tinker ignores my warnings about a toxic guy and says it's just a friend's date, even after hearing he threatened his ex with suicide. Now she's cold towards me after I called him out. Is our friendship worth sacrificing over a guy who can't be trusted? My friendship may end over a guy. Trigger warning, suicide threats, possible signs of abuse. I can add more if needed. Oh, and I don't want this to be shared out. Thanks, on mobile, so please excuse any typos. So my friend Tinker and I have been best friends for around 3 to 4 years. This will be lengthy, so buckle in everyone. Background. She used to date a guy for 4 years, but he was not the best boyfriend. He barely did the bare minimum, such as not buying her a birthday gift for her 16th birthday. However, she stayed with him due to the occasional moments when he was nice. I tried to encourage her to break up with him towards the end because of how he treated her, and although she agreed, she never followed through. Consequently, he ended their relationship via text message, which I find disrespectful. After their breakup, I advised her to remain single for a while since it would be beneficial for her mental health. She told me she wouldn't date for the next 2 years. We lasted only 2 weeks. She developed a crush on another guy, and despite our mutual friend Rose and I advising her not to date him since we were all in the same friend group and he had also just ended a relationship and would likely use her as a rebound, she started dating him within a month and they broke up after just 2 weeks. She was deeply hurt by this, and I am a problem solver type of person. I am really trying to be more emotionally aware, but I think I lack empathy. Therefore, I attempted to facilitate peace between them because it had torn apart our group as we predicted. However, she refused to speak to him altogether. Once again, she stated that after him, she would not date again. About 1 or 2 months later, she liked another guy, but they never dated because she claimed he had too many female friends. This guy was my favorite among them because he treated her well and was very thoughtful. You can see the pattern here.
Man,
Some time ago, I downloaded the app Wiz out of boredom, and Tinker and I would occasionally browse through it together, but I stopped using it because she was unable to access it since it was blocked on her phone. She introduced me to a different app that was similar, which featured a function displaying people's points gained through texting others. Rose and I downloaded it as well, but we deleted it because we both found it strange. She did not delete hers. By the way, her profile picture featured her body rather than her face, which, while flattering, I felt would invite inappropriate comments from guys. The next day, she told me she went through her requests and found a guy named Jake from her school who was part of the basketball team. He had a score of around 2,000 points. I advised her to delete him and she complied. A while later, she informed me that she had been following people from her school and accidentally followed him, which I doubted because his profile was public. They began talking on Instagram. She also asked me if he was out of her league. I assumed she meant he was beneath her since she has a very cute face and an incredible body. I'm serious. She has an attractive figure and well-defined abs. To be blunt, I found this guy unattractive. He had a patchy beard and his hair was so-so. I felt slightly irritated that she would think so little of herself. She showed us one of his messages, which was cringeworthy and made the rest of us laugh. Tinker then mentioned how they had been conversing at school and chatting during breaks. I didn't mind at first, but I started to feel uneasy and uncomfortable about this guy, bearing in mind that I had never met him, so all my impressions were solely based on her perspective, which she would undoubtedly embellish since she liked him. One particular incident stood out when she injured her foot and had difficulty walking. Her crutches were far from her chair, and she was working at a table in a hallway-type area during a sports activity as she couldn't participate. He approached her, slammed his hands on the table on either side of her and said, "We have a problem." Tinker replied, "What problem?" And he responded, "You." Tinker is quite short, around 5 feet to 5 feet 1 inch, while Jake is approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall. I was uncertain, but I found this behavior threatening and told her that, had it been me, I would have grabbed my crutches for defense. I understood that it was intended to be flirty, but it sent shivers down my spine as she recounted the event. I expressed my discomfort to her. I also reminded her that she had previously stated she would not date again and warned her against breaking that promise, as it would lead to developing a dependency on others, which we had witnessed in an ex-friend. Tinker later told me that Jake and his ex broke up because they wanted different things from the relationship. His ex revealed that Jake had attempted to pressure her into performing oral sex when she was still a virgin and not prepared, leading to her having a panic attack. Afterwards, she became intimate with her next boyfriend, and when Jake discovered this, he threatened to take his own life and vanished for 2 days, during which no one could locate him. When he resurfaced, he was in the hospital. When Jake's ex learned that he was talking to another girl, she pulled the same stunt on him. However, this was a bluff. Regardless, they warned teachers to be cautious around him. I told Tinker that I believed the girl was lying out of spite for Jake's previous actions and that she wasn't serious but more so angry. Tinker said she didn't completely trust the girl since she had lied once before, but when she asked Jake about it, he basically confirmed that the girl was telling the truth. Later, Tinker informed me that Jake had asked her out on a date in the city, but because she was not allowed to go there alone, they decided to settle for a fortnight date instead. I reminded her of her promise, and she insisted that she told him the date would only be as friends. In January, Rose and I planned to go out on Valentine's Day, specifically the three of us, as we rarely hung out as a trio due to conflicting schedules. This would be the first year Tinker would spend Valentine's Day single. The next events were rather predictable. I don't know if it was because we didn't talk about it enough, or what, but roughly 2 to 3 days before Valentine's Day, she told me, "I know you're not going to like this, but Jake asked me out for Valentine's Day and I said yes, but only as friends. I have the screenshots." I felt incredibly hurt that she not only went back on her word but also disregarded everything I said and chose to abandon us for a guy she had only been in a talking stage with for a few weeks. I left her on read for a day, as I was truly angry and tend to say hurtful things in the heat of the moment. This was significant because we had talked every day. During this period, she texted me saying she had blocked him. I disliked this, as it felt like she was blocking him just to please me rather than out of her own wish to do so. I didn't like ignoring her, but I needed to take time to plan my response. During this time, I spoke to my friend, her 2-week boyfriend, and asked him to conduct a background check on Jake, as they lived in the same area and he knew many people. He informed me that while they were friends, he had been in contact with one of Jake's exes and he got her to spill information about Jake. Some of it was so bad that he didn't share it with me, while she broke down in tears recounting her experiences. He described himself as a known toxic individual and claimed that Jake was a far worse person than he was. What I learned: Jake has a sexual partner count of 10 at the age of 16 or 17. He has a method where he asks girls to go to the main city, during which, on their date, he asks them to perform oral sex in an alleyway. Upon refusal, he can become aggressive and angry. He broke up with his ex the day after they were intimate for the first time, which was her first time. He recently had a girl over at his house. He simultaneously pursued several romantic interests, which my friend considered cheating. I told my friend that she hadn't listened to my concerns, and he knew her on a more intimate level than I did, mentioning that while she believed herself to be mentally strong, she could easily be persuaded. I said that if she wouldn't listen, the only option would be to let the situation unfold and then be there as emotional support. But I was reluctant to do that because I felt that this was a situation she would not be able to recover from as she did with the others, and I couldn't just sit by and watch it happen without attempting to prevent it. I also discussed the issue with my sister, and she conveyed a similar sentiment, that I needed to distance myself and allow it to happen as it was negatively impacting my mental health, and that I should cease hearing about him altogether. If she does get involved with him and he mistreats her, the only thing I can think of is breaking his ankles and ruining his basketball career. But I don't want to go to jail, at least not for him. I told Tinker that we needed to talk as soon as possible because I wanted to inform her over the phone, but I ended up falling asleep, so I texted her instead. I conveyed the information and reiterated that my intuition was correct and that she could not date him, as he was frankly dangerous and mainly desired her for her body. She agreed, and I believe she did not go on the date, but she still never acknowledged how she had prioritized him over us. I also stated that I would not involve myself in her relationship with Jake, as it was evident she would never heed my warnings. I told her if something happened, she should not tell me, as I had cautioned her repeatedly. Tinker later mentioned how Jake had confronted her, and during the encounter she joked about control, claiming she could do whatever she wanted, to which he responded no. She recounted how his smile disappeared and his expression shifted, but he quickly regained his composure and changed the subject. However, it was too late since she was already leaving. I interpreted this as evidence that he posed a potential threat. She was screen recording the conversation, and it turned out that Jake was no longer blocked. No way, Sherlock, who would have guessed that? Definitely not me. I never truly believed her claims, especially since she had his number and called him, which incurs charges for her unless it's an emergency. They followed each other on Snapchat and Instagram. Mind you, she never actually blocked him on Instagram, as it indicated she still followed him. I pointed this out, but I don't think I received a response. Sometime later, it was as if she forgot everything he had done and she began commenting on finding him attractive. In response, I jokingly insulted him, calling him unattractive and critiquing his looks in general, which I know I shouldn't do, but his despicable actions justify my disdain. She didn't seem to appreciate this, although she never communicated her feelings. Eventually, I mentioned to her that I had consulted another person. This was the third person after she had dismissed the first guy. This one echoed the same advice, that I needed to take a step back, to reaffirm my point that he wasn't a good guy because I knew she still liked him and would likely date him if given the chance. She became cold and started providing one-word responses, so I ceased the conversation until roughly 2 to 3 days later when she returned with "Sorry, bro. I was mad." That was all I told her, since this was not the first time something upset her, though it didn't involve me. That her excuse was insufficient because after acting cold towards me and ignoring me, I received a weak apology that explained nothing, expecting me to happily embrace her as if everything were fine. We ended up in an argument where she claimed I had established a precedent of ignoring her. I had only ignored her once for just a day, whereas she had done so several times. She argued that it didn't matter because ignoring someone is ignoring someone regardless. I told her I had insulted Jake without considering her feelings, which I acknowledged, but that was mainly because I was genuinely concerned about her dating him. She claimed that she interpreted my statement about stepping back as me not caring about her at all, to which I clarified she had misunderstood my message. I didn't want to step back, but I felt I had to. Additionally, I admitted my tone was condescending and lacked empathy, something I regretted, but it's just how I communicate when arguing. I tend to write more formally. I expressed my discontent over her abandoning us for him, how she reneged on her promise not to date, and how he obviously displayed abusive tendencies that she would also have to endure. Furthermore, I highlighted that while I took the initiative to research this guy to see if I was mistaken about him being a bad guy, she had not bothered to do the same and instead posted pictures of herself and her other friends across various platforms without addressing the situation. She agreed with me on this point. I pointed out that she should understand that she cannot fully believe anything until it directly affects her. I do not understand how she is not an atheist then, and that she viewed the claims made by Jake's ex as nonsense. Throughout our discussion, I responded to every one of her texts, articulating my viewpoints, whereas her responses were generally informal and sometimes unclear. She would address only a few of my points. I sent multiple texts, jokingly mentioning that it wouldn't bother me if she didn't read them all because I had written so many. She acknowledged that I had written a lot and stated she would not read them. The matter was never resolved. It has been tense since then. We hardly communicate, do not view each other's stories, and when we do talk, our conversations are brief. I don't particularly mind friendships ending, but I invested more in this one than in others as I had hoped it would endure, and I do not want it to conclude because of a bad guy. I can be quite prideful, so I am not initiating contact to break the silence because that would imply regret over my actions, and I have none. I am feeling so exhausted and lost. I find myself questioning my own advice since I do not want her to get hurt. Anyway, I hope you found this engaging. Until next time, folks. Summary: I believe my friend has poor taste, but I cannot allow her to date this particular individual as he crosses a boundary and may jeopardize our friendship. Additionally, red appears to be her favorite color. Story 3. After 5 years of my boyfriend's escalating abuse, I'm finally breaking free. "You're just my roommate now," he said as he wrapped his hand around my throat. "Do I leave this toxic cage and trust my instincts, or will I regret it forever?" Trigger warning: violence. I have made the decision, I think, to leave my boyfriend. I am scheduled to move tomorrow, but I still have many doubts and fears. History of the relationship: we met 5 years ago. I am now 25 years old and he is 39. About 8 months to 1 year into the relationship, we had our first significant fight and outburst nearly. I believe it was related to politics or something similar, I cannot even remember. He yelled at me and I yelled back. Yes, I have also yelled at him and even screamed. It was a couple of months later before the fights escalated to verbal abuse involving name-calling and insults directed at my intelligence. I can honestly say that I did not resort to name-calling until about a year ago. This does not make it acceptable. I am just trying to clarify my own wrongdoing as well. I have been clingy, probably too suffocating. He is not the type to be physically affectionate or even emotionally available, really. Perhaps he was for the first year. For me, it is very important to connect with a life partner physically outside of sexual intimacy. A simple hug without having to ask for it would be nice. However, I have resorted to asking for such affection in an attempt to respect his personal boundaries. We do not go out often, and when we do, it is usually something he has planned and wants to do. When I plan things, it generally feels like a chore to him, which casts a negative vibe on anything I am interested in. I feel as though I cannot express myself in this relationship. There are no shared interests, only his. I am willing to listen to him for hours, but when I try to speak, he seems to lose interest. When I attempt to communicate this, he responds, "I just don't find it interesting. I am not trying to be mean, I am just being honest." Right. Even if I am not fully engaged in what he is discussing, I still make an effort to listen and pay attention. I discovered some messages between him and several random women discussing meeting up or sending sexually suggestive messages. This was about 2.5 to 3 years into our relationship. He stated that he can talk to whoever he wants, to which my point was, yes, you can, but not in that way. Our arguments have turned physical and I have never thrown the first punch or anything. I have yelled and screamed because I wanted to be heard, which does not excuse my behavior. He has pushed me, pinned me, dragged me, slapped me, punched me, kicked me, and choked or strangled me. The choking or strangling is the most recent incident, which has happened about 2 to 3 times. He claims it is my fault because I yell at him and never stop. He says it is my fault because I unleashed the monster within that he tries to keep in check. Is it my fault? Are the slapping, hitting, and shoving my fault too? It is not an everyday occurrence 2 times a month, perhaps 3. There was a time when it felt like every day, and every time it ended with him saying that I never know when to stop. Why is it always my responsibility? In the last 6 months, 5 years into our relationship, he has stated that he views me as a roommate and that I do not have to leave. In fact, he would be sad if I did. No more fighting. I am human, I have needs including physical affection occasionally. But he said no more fighting. Right? It is my responsibility to avoid conflict, of course. Ouch. Roommate, I asked for clarification. You no longer love me. He responded, you know I love you. I said, you know what I mean, and he replied, I have love for you, but no, I am not in love with you. After 5 years of holding on, I am merely a roommate and half-loved. I began searching for apartments and kept getting overlooked. I was very transparent about my apartment search. A room has been offered to me. I informed him 3 times in over a week that I was moving. The first time I mentioned it and asked him for a price for the bins containing my belongings as I intended to reimburse him. He said he would find out and asked where I found a place. I replied, does it matter, at XYZ location. The second time I said, if there is nothing else to discuss, I will begin the process on Sunday. He responded, I am busy, my phone is almost dead, do what you have to do. I do not believe his phone was dying. That seems to be one of his excuses when he does not want to be bothered or have an inconvenient conversation, or he blocks me, puts me on Do Not Disturb, and then claims his phone is acting up. In anger, he has admitted to doing so. The third time 2 days ago, he asked if I was working and I indicated that I would be off for 3 consecutive days designated for moving. He said, you got a place. I responded, this is now the third time I have said it, yes. He replied, I did not realize you only said you found something. Did you pay money? I said, no, please read back. He said, I do not have time to read back. I then reiterated that I have made my intentions clear multiple times. Okay, I just did not realize, sorry. I asked, how? He claimed he had a lot going on. He was interviewed for a promotion. The interview went well, but he was not selected. What I am experiencing. My grandfather passed away less than a week ago. My younger brother was just sent overseas. And I am grappling with the fact that the man I love apparently does not love me. He said, I do not even have time to catch my breath. Have a good day. Is that seriously all you have to say? What else is there to say? You know where I stand and I cannot talk at work. I am sorry, but I do not know what to do. I have been open and honest and that is all I know how to do. I replied, what does that even mean? You told me you no longer love me and see me as a roommate. He responded, yes, and the goal was to fix that. At least that is what I thought, but we always end up back to fighting. I am not dealing with that anymore. Which is almost amusing. He does not allow me to discuss how he has treated me because it is in his past, and he is moving forward. What about me? I am trying. I cannot even look at him and tell him how he has made me feel, the fear, the hurt. But apparently, that is my responsibility. I am also very lost at the same time. What if it is my fault, all of it? What if I move into this new place and realize that I have made the biggest mistake of my life? Can I live with that? Do I remain until my loyalty leads to my death? His hand wrapping around my throat is a feeling I do not think I will ever recover from. When I ask him why he still wants me to stay, he says, it makes sense for us both financially. After the second time I told him I was leaving, he sent me a house listing. So he does not want to live together because he loves me and wants to be with me. He wants me to stay because it makes sense financially for us both. Both? Where is the financial logic? Will my name be on the house? He has said yes, but it does not make sense to me. Can I choose where it is, how it is decorated? Can I even select the floor or wall color? No, he is already set on what he has in mind. To him, his ideas must be 1000% truth. In fact, it is his life and I am being dragged along as a potential live-in option for him. What should I do? Am I the problem? Should I continue to leave? Am I giving up? I feel a great deal of guilt in leaving, but he has been more than verbally clear, right? To summarize, am I making the right decision?